Yes.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. Everyone's on?
Hello.
Hello. Okay.
สวัสดีครับอาจารย์
Sawadee krap. Okay, sounds like everyone is on. Welcome to the 30th Ask the Chief Forum. This one's going back to my original plan for the forum to a 1 hour format. That's what it was originally supposed to be. And it kind of got a little bit long over time. So anyway, I'm going to start out with exercises and then we can get going. All right. Position. We're going to be pulling that energy up, circulating it through our bodies, starting now. 1, we're going to do 3 of these. 2, and 3. Start to feel that energy flowing. Okay, now hands approximately 12 inches apart. Going to push that energy. You should start to feel that. Hands. Anyone not feeling it, let me know.
Chief is Nelly. I don't feel it.
Okay, you're going to put your hands just a little bit closer together. So, pushing that energy towards you. Let me know when you feel it.
I feel it, Chief. Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, now we're going to take this energy and we're going to create our containment around ourselves. Also, we're going to use it to contain forum. Containing 1, 2, 3. 2, 3. All right. Containing the venue. 1, 2, 3. Containing our space. 1, 2, 3. And pushing that energy out. Expanding that energy through the walls, the ceiling, through the floors. And 1 more. Okay, very good. So we're going to start with, I guess, the first question is
That was recently submitted
that.
a client about why do you do the why? Or why did you choose to do it?
Mm-hmm. So I think it had to do with the pressures of other people that you socialize with. If you start to change the way that you greet them, some people just feel, I don't know, just uncomfortable with it, or I believe that literally is whatever the density in there, because it's about your decision to do what you decide to do for and with yourself. Which you're not imposing on anyone else by using the why. Now, what I liked about the why when I moved to Asia, it had to do with not touching another person's energy. In other words, by just basically a why. Now, my whys aren't I pretty much adapted it from Thailand. But there's various ways of whying here. There are rules to it here, but mine is not so stringent. So when I why, generally why like this. I know there's a why from this angle, and even when there's younger kids or something, they why they do this little bounce thing. And I think that might be, I'm not sure if boys do it or is it girls.
Why for royalty?
Yeah, there's why for royalty, or why someone who's on the higher echelon, with the why is up here.
But sometimes people, like friends, will joke around, like when they're begging someone, they're like, ah.
Yeah, sometimes they use it humorously. Yeah, you see that in some other Asian cultures. You know, not, friendly begging someone to do something. So, but my reason has to do with I like the fact from a story that I told maybe a couple times on forums, having shook hands with a politician, a prominent politician, some decades ago, and that person who I didn't like me either. We never met each other, but he puts his hands out there, you know, to do the handshake, and literally at that time I didn't have the defenses that I have now. I got totally contaminated by this guy's handshake, and you know, I'll just repeat it, just short, you know, just a little bit of short explanation what happened. That I shook this person's hand, and we both weren't really, you know, keen on one another. And then, you know, release the handshake. I'm leaving the room to go elsewhere just to be out of this person's space, out of his energy. On my way out, I'm not really realizing that I'm just doing this with my right hand. And after a point, I just kind of noticed it because I start to feel this weird tingling going up through my hand, up my arm, and then inevitably through my whole body, where I ended up having to sit down. And I really got toxed by this person's energy and even by their intent, and probably because of the nasty attachments that this individual had. I would just say that he probably was a shapeshifter or something anyhow. And that's the kind of energy that this individual had. Now, I've had some questions about it even before then, where a lot of men with handshaking, they find it as a way of testing each other, you know, how hard they can grip, and, you know, and who's controlling the handshake. You know, a lot of nonsensical things that waste energy and wasted my time. That's how I felt it. Now, the handshake is very Western, and the definition of the handshake, from what I read years ago, and then I just decided to bone up on it again, that the handshake in Europe had to do with showing a person that you don't have a weapon in your hand. So they're both, you know, I should say, not so much a combination, I'm trying to think of the word, but they're both showing that they don't have a weapon in their hands. So you know, we can meet, or we can negotiate or whatever. And also, it was, I think also, it went as far as having to do with not having a sword that I'm not about to like touch your head off or something when you entangle hands. So the meaning behind that had to do with, you know, primarily trust, but after all these many years, you know, from way back when they started that tradition was started, it just stuck. So the question had to do with a form of handshaking and interacting with hands in the culture, let's say Black culture in America, where it comes talk about, you know, giving. When I was a kid, I would say in the '60s, they would do the thing, you know, give me five, you know, this thing, you know, or just sometimes just one hand, just give me five. And that was just part of Black culture. And that was also a sign of separating itself from white culture, because they were literally being pushed out away, you know, in other words, through segregation and so on and so forth. We're not part of it. Therefore, we have our own thing going on. Now, some of this stuff, I'm not exactly sure. I try to get to the roots of, you know, in other words, the, you know, give me five, or call it DAP or whatever. But looking at Western, I guess, the Western dictionary and so on, asking for the origins, they won't give the origins of it. They just talk about what it is. So I was around at the time when I knew when it was going on, also around the time when the elaborate handshaking started, and that started during the late '60s as well, having to do with the Black Power movement. And it was all, you know, all these kind of, sometimes it would just get really elaborate, you know, all these handshaking and, you know, elbows involved and all this other kind of stuff, you know. Also later, high-fiving. Another thing that just came out with the Black community that got adopted by a broader part of American community, used a lot of times in sports. So you would see just across the board individuals high-fiving in sports. So it kind of made its way out of the Black community into the broader community.
That's from as early as the 1930s on Google.
With the Give Me Five
Give
thing.
me five, yes.
Yeah, so in that sense, way before I was, came into this realm, they were doing that type of thing. Yeah, and it's just the way, like it's just kind of like a stylish, kind of cool thing, whatever, so on and so forth. But later on, like I said, in the late '60s, it became something. Some of these things became synonymous with a movement of sorts. The movement got watered down over time, like movements in this world tended to do, and it just became kind of like a theme.
Yeah.
It didn't really have any meaning behind it. So, the more shallow aspect of it, that makes me, of this group because I do this thing. And for me, again, even with that, there are people who would abuse that. Put your hands out there, some kind of whap, just really slap the shit out of your hand. That type of stuff. So for me personally, all the touching and so on and so forth, and also when I got deeper into into my profession in New York City, and I was dealing with a predominantly international crowd, so not a whole lot of Black folks were involved in the field I was in. But when we would come across one another, we would have this confusion as to what kind of handshake we should give each other. Should we give the Western, European handshake, or should we give, the brother handshake? Which means, in the face of our white counterparts, are we basically telegraphing something that will scare them, by going into that kind of thing? So all of that to say that I find this going to why it's just a simpler way, but also a logical way of not getting contaminated.
Business, they were trying to force you to look into their eyes.
Yeah, there's also the whole thing you have to do with business, and some ones who, it doesn't make them a genius because they're good in business, but they say, I don't trust anyone who won't look me in the eyes. Looking in the eyes, and I've talked about that and some other forms, as other cultures, certain cultures consider that impolite to be staring into someone's eyes, and there are other cultures that have more of an acceptance and understanding, that continuing understanding of energy and things that are considered mystical or paranormal, where someone can influence you through looking into their eyes. And it does happen, it continues to happen. And if you think in terms of a guy in a situation where he wants to chat up a woman, and he kind of picks and chooses who might be more susceptible. If a woman seems a little bit too confident in herself, a little too, solid in her stance, he might want to do this eye contact thing with her. But someone who looks like she's a bit insecure, that's my target. So you'll find even parents will do that to their children, because they've created this insecurity with their kids, sort of like an inferiority complex, that the kid feels inferior to the parent. Therefore, the parent can dominate the kid through eye contact. And my mother used to do a different thing, wasn't the same thing. Hers, it just had to do if she glanced at you in a certain way. So it wasn't like she'd get in your face and then look in your eyes. If she glanced at you in a certain way, you knew what that glance meant. Now, the story I told about my father unit, and he did this when I was an adult. He tried to do this type of stuff, which had to do with trying to influence me into doing something that I wasn't interested in doing. Where he would just, position himself right in front of me, look me in the eyes, and I'm saying, this is uncomfortable, what's he up to? So by that time, through business, these guys want you to look them in their eyes. I would just be looking right in the middle, right at the bridge of the nose. Or sometimes the nose, and I just shift my glance around, the nose, between the eyes, or sometimes just off to the side, just like to break it and then come back and so on and so forth. Which again, there are individuals, whether they know they're doing it or not, I would say their attachments know that they're trying to influence you. They try to get over on you. Salespeople who try to get you to look them in the eyes are trying to override your common sense. So anyway, all that to say, as far as like with the why, I just find it to be a safer way and a very easy way to protect your energy. And again, some of you guys have shared with me that there are people who had a really hard time with you using the why. To the point where some would just would literally invade your space, whether you want them to or not, to touch you, and not realizing that is the rudest thing you can do. I've not given you permission to touch me, but it's almost like an ownership type of deal. And so there are damages to all groups where there is a ownership thing. If you're not doing this particular thing that we have, or unspoken, we have agreed upon doing, what's wrong with you? We all shake hands like that, or we all do the pound and so on and so forth. Which logically, it's like, when did I say that I was owned by anyone? Owned by an idea, owned by a group, owned by a culture, owned by anything? Why can't I? So raise the questions within yourself. Why can I express myself in this very harmless way? At least I am acknowledging you. So the difference between this and this. So they want to tell you how to acknowledge them. So again, if you were to ask them what the roots of their handshaking and all that, I would pretty much guarantee that the majority of people have no idea, that they were just basically following something that has been given to them or that they've seen doing without any question. Now, I think that might lead to the one having to do with chic, with the sick chic or whatever it's called.
Yes, well, I know that you said there was like different eras where it was cool to look sick.
Yeah.
And it even is in today's fashion and style, and they have no idea that its origins are very dense, and like even that handshaking. People think, oh, it's to acknowledge one another, but really density gets essence, is able to do what they want to do better. Because you said that a lot of ancient cultures have a way to greet one another without touching. So they had to introduce a better way to feed.
Yeah, and that's most Asian cultures I've had any contact with, their greetings don't have anything to do with touching one another. But even in Japan, there tends to be the bow. I think there's a certain type of bowing thing that was going on in China, and in Thailand again, why, and various other cultures. Even I would say in Southeast Asia, there are certain greetings with just even one hand. And that might even be something that is a derivative from some era in China as well, just even the one hand which is in the chest as a greeting and an acknowledgement. So we were talking about, I guess it's called sick chic. The topic came up when I was doing some research recently that kind of folds into this, where people get certain traditions from. So the tradition of, there's a tradition in the 1600s, I believe, I think it was 1600s, one of the Queen Elizabeth in England, where because she was a queen, she could afford a lot of sweets and so on and so forth, and therefore, I guess dental care wasn't the rage back then, and she ended up losing her teeth. And because she was the queen could do no wrong. The commoners decided to take on trying to look that way, where they would take, I guess it was like soot and cover the teeth, it would make them look as though they were missing teeth. Now, we're trying to do a little bit of research having to do with, because I've noticed in period Japanese films over the years that back, I don't know if it's the Edo period or so on, and maybe even before then, that a woman who's considered to be a high-class woman would black out her teeth. And, as a kid, I'm watching this, and, but they were looking at her as, oh, this is considered a sign of elegance or the upper class. Also, with Queen Elizabeth, she was wearing, using this type of powder, or not really, was it a powder or something like that, to cover her face, which was very, very white. So she was very, very white. So the whole idea of it having very, very white skin was considered to be something of the higher class, of the upper class. And if someone did not, their skin had some tan to it, it means that you were of the lower class, which means you had to work. But actually the story behind her starting that particular trend had to do with her having a smallpox. And she was using this to cover all the scars from the smallpox. And no one, I guess someone knew it because it came down in history that that's what the deal was. And so the commoners, they're not really thinking anything, they're just following suit. This, it's almost like the Wizard of Oz. It was like the movie they made from the Wizard of Oz called The Wiz, where he just would change the color every minute of what clothes are in style. Gold's in style now, and they were kind of doing it, kind of exaggerating a bit, but they're dancing around, everybody's dancing around, they change the color of the lights, and everybody's wearing gold, and then he goes, okay, blue's the color now, and then everybody goes and, and they start dancing around in blue, so it's something similar to that it's like a follow the leader type deal. Mm-hmm. So follow what you were told, don't question it. These particular people, it goes all the way down to kids and the popular kids. The popular kids will sometimes set, the fashion, set what fashions are worn in school and so on and so forth. And a lot of times, some kids will just like, look, how about, wearing, I don't know, a screwdriver, in my hair as a style. But if it's the popular girl or, or so on and so forth, then they're like, ooh, They don't question it. They don't think, if it was like Joe Schmo or Sally from the other side of the tracks, they say, what the hell is wrong with you? You crazy? But if they have a certain status, then all of a sudden it becomes acceptable.
The word chic, and they called it consumption chic or consumptive chic.
From
for the sick, tuberculosis. You'd like to explain?
Oh yeah, well they're talking about also the frail look. That is like consumption chic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's also like from tuberculosis as well. So certain high, so-called upper class, I should say, in women would just look frail because they're sick. But again, it became a fashion statement to the commoner.
The blush.
Yeah, also, the blush actually was the result in the lips and so on and so forth from this records that, that I got had to do with signs of tuberculosis also. Mm-hmm. That is, the cheeks would get red as well as the lips get red. And the lips a lot of times were red having to do with bleeding from the mouth. And then constantly coughing up blood and so on and so forth. And also where the girdle came in had to do with, the frailty look of someone who was sick. And, with nice clothes, he's sick, but he's wearing nice clothes, and then they just assume that this is a style. And I remember in the late 60s, there was this model that came in to be from England named Twiggy. And she literally looked like a stick with eyes. Round head, short hair. You can look it up on Google, and you'll see a picture of it. It's very, very, very thin. And that started a trend in the United States for women who look kind of like little boys, not much bosom, but pretty much straight down type of shape. And this still exists, but they call it what, heroin chic or something in the early 2000s or something, having to do with the grunge movement and so on and so forth. Some of the grunge movement styles had to do with messy hair and just, and plaid shirts and just kind of like almost like the shape of a waif or something like that. Now, also, I believe that they're trying to hang on to the anorexic thing. And that's where anorexia thing, at least this is what they're saying. Anorexia was influenced by trying to get this look of this rail look, this very, very thin look. Now, when I was a kid, I remember watching some movies, and they, from even before my time, there's a woman named Mae West in the movies. I'm dating myself. I don't know if anybody remembers this particular actress. And she had big, buxomy. She wore a girdle, but she had a lot of chest and a lot of hip. That was considered sexy. And also, those who would remember Marilyn Monroe was considered to be a buxomy woman also, and that was considered in other words, the beauty, what beauty was at that particular point in time. And then, like I said, as the 60s went on, and then the fashion industry adopted this kind of style with the very, very, very thin models and so on and so forth. Then it just continued, and then it took on other forms. But all that to say, you can say, what does it have to do with the why? Literally have to do with how, the way that people are greeting, where is the origins, where are the origins of their ways of greeting. And most people don't check it out. Anyone have questions?
Yes, Mimosa, you have a question.
Yes. Go ahead.
It's about like more traditional rituals. For example, tribes like the Long Neck tribe in Thailand, or there are also a lot of nation peoples or tribe in Africa and in Asia where they have these fashion things that are like actually harmful to the body. What is that? Because like the long neck.
Yeah. Now, if you wanted to make it fun, we can definitely muscle test on these particular ones. And I know that some of the traditions you're talking about, those I think here in Thailand, I think it goes across the borders into some of the other cultures where they wear the rings and stretch the neck, or the ones where they put the plate in the lips, stretch out the lips. So it's like, where do these things come from? But again, these are pretty much obscure in comparison to what modern society accepts. Modern society will accept the earplug, which is something that is indigenously traditional for certain communities. I try to stay away from the word tribe and use community or nation, because the way that the word tribe comes in, generally when I was a kid, had to do with minimizing a group. So I call it a community. Why aren't they a community, and why isn't a village in rural Europe a tribe? But very well taken. These are traditions that come from something before. I would hazard a not such a guess with my awareness of what I do and aware of. Some things come pre these particular people coming to this particular planet. It goes against the Smithsonian and all the scientists and all their jargon and so on and so forth. But why should I listen to them? I don't know them. One thing I do know, my sources pan out. My life got better listening to my sources over listening to their sources. So we can go into certain traditions. And even I believe, like in China, a sign of beauty some years ago had to do with binding women's feet. So you're talking about some of that stuff too, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, some of like that one, or just recently when I was in Tanzania, they like take out the front teeth and they scarf their skin with different signs, stuff like that.
Yeah, and a lot of times this I would say sometimes they consider it honoring a deity or something by trying to emulate whatever that deity was or whoever it was that may have, damned them with this concept that this is how, this is what's beauty. This is beauty. If you look like this, I will look favorably upon you. If you emulate this, look, hold on a second, I'm going to put the protection on this age. She's already starting to tap this stuff. And so, bear with me for a minute. Then,
Is wide about those secrets.
mhm. Okay. Over. The problem they're having is just questioning everything. So, you go into a place and immediately hand goes out, and then your inclination is your hand goes out and you shake hands without thinking. But they don't want you to think about everything that you're doing. So even in the sense of when individuals are drinking a lot of alcohol and so on and so forth, I would say that a lot of that kind of stuff has to do with trying to escape, because they've been convinced that being in this, you have to be in the misery, or else if you find an easier way out, even though people will transition themselves out all the time, they still do, but maybe smaller numbers because they have folks frightened to escape their misery. So they will indulge in anything that they can use to escape, and then walk around in this escape mode. So I would say alcohol initially is something that has to do with escape. Sometimes in certain cultures, certain concoctions, certain psychotropics had to do supposedly with connecting, and not supposedly, they would connect with the other side, but it depended on what you were connecting with. So I would say a lot of these things would be introduced post yin of yin. I say post yin of yin. Because pre yin of yin, there was no desire to escape your experience or your expression. Because there was nothing there to tax you or to stress you or to cause all of these particular types of emotions of fear and and angst and inferiority and so on and so forth. All these things were introduced during the time of the yin of yin period. Anything post, I should say, well, I'm trying to put that together. I'll come back to it. But anyway.
Fashion that is painful is posted.
Yeah, so anything that is discomfort, okay, so this group knocks their teeth out to emulate something. Would that something be a dense thing? Yes, something that literally, and sometimes, folks who embrace those, they may not like to hear it, but there are times that they're being played with. So when I lived in New York, there were the Hasidic Jews, the ones who had the little curl thing, on the side, which means that they were emulating someone that they considered to be higher up in their religion. And and they've been doing it for a very, very long time. You can go there to this day, similar type of hat, like a short stovepipe deal, a certain type of beard, and the curl. Or certain ones who wear this hat that just seems like a fur hat or whatever, and also wearing predominantly another black coat and suit and just a white shirt and so on and so forth. All of these are something that are influenced by something in the past that they were basically told to look up to. No questions asked. And that has to do with the yin and yang realm. It goes all the way to public schools. Oh, you're taught this and you're taught that, and you need to learn this and you need to learn that, and so on and so forth. And don't try to equate, math with English or vice versa. All these different courses. If you're in English class, they don't want to hear anything about history. Depends on the teacher though too. But when I was in school, everything was in its box. You go from this one, your mind is in this box. You go to this one, it's almost like one of those little slide projectors, and you have to slide your mind into this box. You go to this one, and you slide your mind. This is a form of fragmenting also. Fragmenting the consciousness. Okay. So, you were adding something to say?
Well, there's the rings around the neck that comes from emulating an entity.
Yeah, so the rings around the neck, emulating an entity, yes. Right?
They said it started like that, but the being never asked them to do it. That's what it said.
Let me see verification. Okay, so as Ms. A was picking up, that it started, but being did not want, it was not basically asking them to do this to themselves. But I would say it's a dense influence as to why they felt that they needed to emulate something, because who they were themselves, they felt were not enough.
Ah!
So it goes back to, in other words, doing certain things that are considered to be cultural, because in who are you to, in other words, interact in a way that you feel is positive for yourself, opposed to what the masses are doing. So it's like this concept that the masses are following a higher order, than yourself. Is this correct? You get a yes with that. So again, that's very much, again, kind of stuff comes in and just tells you, just follow, don't think.
And what you said, Chief, about those who are emulating their queen with the blackened teeth and all that, it's like, I am shit and God is great behavior, like in religion as well.
Yeah. So I've said in the past that everything, we talk about religion is separate. Religion is not separate. Everything is pretty much in the same, not pretty much, very much in the same vein as religion. I would say these things were pre-religion, and religion follows those orders. So there's something else. So if you have a society where there's a king or something, he doesn't have to be religious. He just has to have the backing of the density that will support him and his position. So again, I would say that they would look at Queen Elizabeth, who had lost her teeth, due to bad dental care and too much sugar or whatever, as a deity. And I do believe that that is the mindset of all the royals on this planet. That if you were to ask people who are loyal to those particular royals, they will say that those individuals are the sons and the daughters of God. So that they're on a much different level than they are. So, same as in the church. So, you look up to an entity called God. So anyway, I think as far as with that's, with going back again to the why and why I don't have a problem with basically doing the why to people, and literally, if I don't even need to explain it to tell you the truth. But some will say, well, why do you do it? And I just don't. Protecting my energy. And some people feel funny because they bought into, a system they didn't even question, and sometimes they feel embarrassed. Some who that they hadn't thought about it, but you did it. Or you found some source that made sense Because I would ask the questions, and have you ever shaken someone's hand and feel differently afterwards? I would get 100% yes every time. They never thought about it, and never equated it with making physical contact with someone. Or, story I talked about someone trying to leech my energy when having a conversation and touching his shoulders against mine. Another anecdote just recently with a young woman who was at a gathering and was having a conversation about some certain topics or whatever, and the other person is busy touching their shoulder while they're talking to them. Make my point, not touching, to make my point, and she literally, after a certain point, she said she got fed up with it, and she said, she said, can you talk to me without touching me? So he may or she may not have felt, the person who was doing the touching, that they were purposely doing anything wrong, but the things that they feed know that their purpose is to feed on that person's energy. But I'll tell you, the same person may touch this person, may not touch that person. Could be maybe that person's energy is more parasitic than theirs. Or maybe that person's energy is not so tasty to their masters. This person here, and this is the person who's actually does the work, so does containment, and does, works on trying to clear himself and so on and so forth, and have had this issue before with other people wanting to touch. It's happened with Ms. A also, in the past, and maybe more than a few times, I would say. Yeah, where they're talking to her, and Ms. A is in the midst of the movement and doing all the work and so on and so forth, and the person just wants to touch her hand while she's talking and hold and touch her hand while she's talking. That all the time, every time someone's done that, their attachment, their density is feeding off of you. Because there's no need to touch. So if someone is upset about not being able to hug you or fist bump you, do some kind of contact, it has to do with their density. Wanting that piece of essence. And then they get weird. You say, why are you getting weird? I have the freedom to do with my vehicle as I please. If you don't like what I'm doing, go away. I'm not taking a club and hitting you in the head or telling you you got a why also. But you want to do this, I do this. Also, this part of wanting to be part of a group. So the mentality of a group does not equal the mentality of one single person. Or it's a lot weaker than the mentality of one person. Why you get with group surges and all this other kind of stuff. Like one mind starts to radiate and control all the other minds. Because in essence, the way things are set here, they would like humans to not realize that they've been programming humans to be, in other words, have a hive mind. So how can you get a mass of individuals to do certain things that one little group says to do, and you don't even question these groups? Say, well, who told you to do this? The president. Oh, okay. And then you have, all the ones who are, it's the president, you should do what the president has, overriding logic. As a little kid said, why? I don't know this guy. Why should I follow him? I don't know him. So my parents said, I'm not letting you go to fucking Vietnam. But the president said, go to Vietnam. Everyone said, well, the president said it. Screw your father or your mother who actually are concerned about your safety. So I was like, well, can I have a meeting with this president? Of course you can. Just do what you're told. Again, people trained to have a hive mind. Not to think, just do.
That's why in the church cult they have you hold everyone hold hands the whole congregation.
I would say that there's a yes to that. It's like this whole, combining energies, combining influences. Hold on a second, they're having a connection there. Come up and release. There we go.
Thank you, everyone. They also be like, shake hands with someone you don't know, and you're like, why? He could be a freaking whatever.
Yeah, I've had the misfortune of being in some situations like that where there's like, turn to your neighbor and shake his, I don't want to touch this person. You gotta shake it, or else you're just really, a turd in a punch bowl. Come on, get with the program, shake their ass. But if and I have, quite young at the time, so I would cave and do it. If you pay attention to how you feel after those types of functions, you start to realize that you feel tired. Something's happened to your energy. Something's tapped into your energy. You could have a group of individuals, and this happened in some of the men's groups that retreats that I had been involved with. You have a circle of men holding hands, and the stuff get kind of weird. Or a situation where someone would get what they call possessed or get the spirit, which had happened to me at one of the men's conferences, but I was asking questions about, show me whether you are really there, if you are these entities on the other side that's supposed to be, I like to use the term guides, whatever, but for the lack of a better word for it, guides, show me that you're there. So we're doing this ritual, bonfire, bunch of men standing around and this scene and so on and so forth. There's a part where I'm holding hands, but then get into we're clapping or whatever. Anyway, at one point, I feel something coming to me, and next thing I'm just like, I'm just done by the electricity going through my whole body. So the guy that was there, who was an African shaman, was there. There was guys from South America, from Africa, some from Europe, whatever, who were considered to be shamans as well, were a part of this whole thing. So I'm like, just getting the spirit or something. So the African shaman says, okay, just have to rub that energy, just rub the energy from the person down into the ground, rub the energy down into the ground. So these guys coming in, rubbing, my arms down and so on and so forth. And lo and behold, a couple of them start to also. So all that to say that when you're doing these types of things with the holding the hand, all you need is one ringer in there who has an ulterior motive. Come on. And you don't even know what their motive is. Their motive is to take all of you naive folks' energy, put it into themselves, boom, and then feed their masters with it, and they get their nice dose.
That happen all the time in the church cult because you get these random people. They don't screen anybody. Just any rando can come into the church, and there's no set number except for the size of the building, and you can even have people on the outside of the building. And then if they have a revival, it's every freaking day, morning and night, for at least a week or two.
So all the person needs to say is that they're a Christian, and they're not. No screening or anything. I'm a Christian, and some might know from some of the other forums that I said that a lot of density hides behind the cover of religion. Because no one's really screening them. It's almost like, I'm a Christian, you're a Christian? Yeah, I'm a Christian. Oh, everything's okay, buddy. Even if the person looks kind of weird or feels kind of weird to you, all he needs to do is say the magic word. I'm Christian, I'm Muslim, I'm Buddhist, I'm Jewish, I'm whatever.
Quote some scriptures.
Yeah, they can memorize a few scriptures or something like that, the book's readily available, so they can study it up and, find a few passages or whatever, and then throw it out there, Then they get into the group. And I know a number of individuals who tend to be pretty, I should say, sensitive individuals who aren't really there for any nefarious reasons. They figure that they're supporting and helping energy flow or something spiritual or whatever, or even when they have individuals come in and pray for someone who's not doing well in the hospital. And one guy said, well, they want to pray. I just, they want to do some positive things. All that said, well, so they're saying, I'm going to pray. That just means it's positive because they say they want to pray. So you may have 6 people come in there, but maybe 4 of them actually are sincere about trying to heal this individual. But maybe 1 or 2 are in there just, hey, look at these suckers. I'm taking all that energy for myself. And there have been stories, even from some of you guys who are clients, of going to some retreat where there's supposed to be, I don't know, these exercises. I don't know if they consider to be about enlightenment or whatever, but supposed to be raising your awareness and all this other stuff. And have individuals come from various places around the world, show up in this one area, and some come in there and they got all this energy and they're all happy and so on and so forth. Some come in there dragging their butts. And after a couple days of this, the ones who are all peppy are drained. The ones who are drained are all peppy, which means someone's feeding on someone's energy. So we have feeders that join everything, even like the Black Lives Matter March. They get all these individuals together under a certain guise, which I say a lot of the stuff is theater, just to cause certain things and get a certain mass of people together. And someone who was involved in the march was talking about they were marching and so on and so forth. It's supposed to be something that's positive, or whatever, to show solidarity and so on and so forth. But by the end of it, they said they were so drugged that by the time they got to the home, they did something they don't normally do. Said with their clothes on, they pass out in bed and didn't wake up till the next morning. Because they went in there and there was something or some things or some ones, and it has to be more than one person. You get a mass of people. That means that there is a feeding thing going on, and boy, they're going to show up and get their piece of that essence. And a lot of times, I've been around long enough to see marches and so on and so forth, been involved with them when I was a kid. Didn't like them either, because I always felt weird after, and I was like preteen at the time. But my father would take me to some of this stuff, my mother would take me to some of these things, civil rights marches and things like that. And I'd just be like, kind of lethargic afterwards, But a lot of marching. I got to the point where someone said, we're going to march. I don't want to hear it. I've been around long enough to see it, and in the end, nothing is fixed. March around and so on and so forth. Density's like, we got them going again. Bring out the Hoover. A lot of energy to suck up. So I would say a movement like what I'm doing, having to do with the mind, understanding how the mind works, how the mind influences, how you are attacked by things, or thinking about things outside of this realm, is more helpful than marching around with a bunch of people you don't know. Because you don't know what their intent is. Why are they there?
There's been plenty of where maybe the movement has a certain goal, and they can easily infiltrate with those who are very much not in support of that goal.
As Ms. A was saying, if you heard that anyone can join certain movements if they're a certain race. They can just, this happened during the Black Power movement back in the late 60s and so on and so forth, where certain leaders of these particular groups, part of Black Panther or whatever, that the feds would come in and just shoot them up, just kill them. And later, there were a few Black men who were hired by the CIA, FBI, whoever, and their job was to infiltrate these groups. And they did. They told what was going on, but these guys was like, oh, another Black face, yes, come on in. You don't know who you're, who's,
Ah!
Come on. And too many times there are people who just in there playing. They're not really serious. And some will join something just to say that they're part of something. They're not really, And even then, there are movements in other countries, even like in, I believe in Russia, or whatever, there was like these uprisings and so on and so forth. And turned out that it was the hierarchy who started the movement. In other words, the group that they were protesting against started the movement against them so that they could get all these people, in this particular place and then lower the boom on them. Disenfranchise them, all these, in other words, those that they were suspicious of, maybe not wanting to follow, follow what they're wanting them to follow. So they would just, let's get someone to start a movement. Get one of our own guys and start a movement. Yes, we're gonna go, and nothing happens to that particular person. Say, wow, that's this guy. He must be an untouchable. He's an untouchable because he's part of the system. Yeah, they don't like that. They're moaning, carrying on. So all that again, going right back to the why again. If it makes sense to you, you find benefit in it for yourself. You find growth in it for yourself. You find that you're not being undermined and you're watching it and you're just, because I don't believe in trusting anything right off the bat. And even my movement, don't trust it right off the bat. See what it's about. Be there long enough to see if you're benefiting from it or whether I'm talking some crap. Or whether, and at this point, a lot of things that have to do with material wealth has to do with being able to see shit, excuse my language. So, if I was in for, big this or shiny this, I don't see shiny this, I don't see big this, but I do know the difference between a comfortable living space opposed to an uncomfortable living space. I'm good with the comfortable living space. But the most important thing to me is my mission. What I know I came here to do. And I know there's a number of you know that you've benefited in ways that you can't even explain being part of it, especially when you're sincere. The more sincere you are, the more amazing it is. Ask those who are sincere. Come on. So you might hear Jose empathing something numerous times, almost every time. Once they get to a certain point, they'll go mind, mind, mind. Because regardless as to whether you think you're free or not in this realm, in the eyes of what controls the realm, you are their belongings. That's how they see it.
Is that
Alexa, stop.
this line is about they would rather own this than to be sincere.
Well, you have to explain that a little bit better for me.
To own a place in your eyes or to own a part of the movement instead of being sincere because they understand owning more than they understand sincerity.
Well, because owning emulates yin of yin. So the concept of owning emulates yin of yin. And the problem with owning is that if you're trying to own another person, makes you think that person, especially even if they're not interested in owning you, wants to be owned. Or you run into someone, you want to own them, they want to own you. Always ends badly. Always ends badly. If you actually follow stories of individuals who were power hungry and they felt they got on the top of something, loves getting people on top of the pedestal, so he kick it out from under them after a certain point. And just watch them splat. And they think it's funny. Hilarious. Some will, well, at least he was rich for a while. for a while, and then from this illusion of wealth to this reality of nothing. When you understand the universe, understand consciousness is, there is no end to growth. It's ever expanding, and the concept of wealth has nothing to do with material goods or who you control. So, and we're going to keep with my new schedule, which is not the new schedule, the old schedule of an hour forum. I'm going to end this one. And we had some other things to talk about, but we got other forums coming up. And I will address some of those things. But hopefully I did address, in a sense, in a broader sense, the question of the why and why you should go ahead and do it.
Yes.
Why? Oh, yes.
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
Chief. I
You're
was just
welcome.
gonna tell you, thank you. You explaining it makes me feel more comfortable and standing by it, just the true logic behind it. So thank you so much. You addressed it perfectly.
Okay, thank you very much, and you're welcome. And everyone, thank you so much for joining this shorter forum. You know, hopefully get used to this, and we will talk to you soon. Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, was that?
Okay. Thank you for what you were saying, because like, I was thinking about what you said about, like, if you as an individual, as a community, they can send any person to shake hands with you and infiltrate your energy, just like a massive group that, like a movement.
Mhm.
That one stood out.